Version 45 of the competitive Brawl Stars tier list. It's here, it's now. You guys know the deal here. We're gonna rank every brawler from worst to best and compare them to how they were in the previous update. And this video was made in help or coordination with all of these pro players here. I did not make this tier list. I had zero input in this tier list, which you will see when we get to Griff, when I adamantly disagree with the pros. But at the end, I know they're better than me. But this tier list does come with a massive disclaimer, okay? This update, Supercell did something a little bit weird with hypercharge releases, and they decided to release one the first week, three or four the next week, and they're just releasing them slower than I normally would expect. So in order for me to get you this tier list and for it to be like as accurate as possible, I would have had to have waited for like 4 weeks for the pros to actually like really decide where the meta is. You guys don't want to wait 4 weeks. So a lot of the hypercharges have not been included in consideration for this video. So keep that in mind, because it's not like I talked to the pros yesterday. It takes a long time to gather all their feedback and put it together. So anyway, let's get into this. Doug is kicking us off at the bottom of the F tier. Worst of the worst, bottom of the bunch. Sorry. Anyway, he didn't receive any changes this update. He is still the worst brawler in the game. We've got more to cover, but I want to give a huge thank you to Repeat.gg for sponsoring today's video. And this is actually like legit. Like, this is a good one. I mean, all my sponsors are great ones, but this has specifically to do with Brawl Stars. Repeat.gg is a website that is constantly hosting tournaments for some of your favorite video games, including Brawl Stars. Seriously, check it out. Link in the description below. You're going to want to create an account because you can win money from playing Brawl Stars. Repeat.gg has over $60,000 in prize pool money for free tournaments in popular games like Brawl Stars, Fortnite, and Rocket League. In fact, they actually just teamed up with Tribe Gaming to create the Tribe Gaming Cup, which is a $2,000 tournament where you earn points by playing regular ranked matches in game. All you gotta do is connect your Supercell ID to the website, and then you'll start earning points for every ranked match that you win, and the players with the most points at the end of the event will earn real cash prizes. Repeat.gg is actually owned by PlayStation. They are very reputable, very trustworthy. Another one of my favorite things about these tournaments is that the prize money doesn't just go to the top 1 or 2 players. There's actually a good chance for you to earn some winnings, even if you're not the best of the best. On top of that, you can enter into multiple tournaments at the same time to increase your chances of winning even more. So seriously, like, I don't know what you guys are waiting. What are you waiting for? Come on, click that link, description below. Start signing up for some tournaments, especially the Tribe Gaming Cup, because it is going to be awesome. Once again, huge thank you to Repeat.gg for sponsoring this video. Bull has moved from the D tier down into the F tier. The overall tank meta is a little bit weaker than before, but Bull was definitely one of the tanks that was hurt a lot from the meta shift. Now there's just really not a good reason to play him. Clancy's moving from the C tier down into the F tier. Clancy's one of the brawlers who is probably way better than what he's currently ranked at, because his hypercharge is going to be released. Without it though, it is unplayable, or he's unplayable. So just keep him in mind though once the, oh wait, hypercharge is already out by the time I'm actually recording this, but the pros haven't had time to actually decide placement. So anyway, Rosa's moving from the B tier down into the F tier. Similar to Bull, no changes were made to Rosa, but she was hurt a lot more than any other tank in the game by how the meta has changed. Time for the D tier. These brawlers suck still. Just not as much as the F tier brawlers. Oh my gosh, Jesse's moving from the C tier down to the D tier. She actually received a small buff to her health, but she still has very underwhelming damage. There just isn't a good reason to use her over many other brawlers, even in heist. If all the meta brawlers are banned, then yeah, you could probably play Jesse. Not at the most competitive level though. Edgar is staying in the D tier. Lots of brawlers were affected by emergency balance changes that shortly came out after the gadgets were reworked, and Edgar's gadgets were both nerfed, so he's actually slightly worse than he was before. Chuck is moving from the C tier down into the D tier. Even though Chuck is actually still really good in heist after the rework, there's basically no other use for him right now. I see some people try and make him work out in hot zone. Honestly, even there's just better options. Colt has moved from the C tier down to the D tier. He didn't receive any buffs, and just like Jesse, he is getting power crept every update as well. Fang is moving from the C tier down into the D tier. Too many of Fang's counters are higher up in the meta right now, and there are several assassins to use that are just much better than him at the moment. BB's moving from the C tier down to the D tier. BB's just another close range brawler that is particularly struggling right now and did not get any buffs this update. Sam is moving from the C tier down to the D tier. I guess Sam's hypercharge really was overrated, because as soon as it was released, he hasn't been used like hardly at all. Shelly's moving from the C tier down to the D tier. Since tanks aren't being used quite as much right now, Shelly is also being used less, since she's really only good for countering them. Okay, now we have the C tier brawlers. These ones aren't quite competitive. There may be some very small situations where the pros might use them, but they're not played nearly as often as the rest of the brawlers in the game. Dynamite is moving from the B tier down to the C tier. Dude, I'm getting hit so hard this update. My skin locked account, like almost all of my brawlers are C tier and below. It's rough. Lots of throwers are actually hurting in this meta because a lot of the more aggressive brawlers are at the top of the meta, and Dynamite is probably like the hardest shot to land out of all of them, especially against fast moving targets. So he's struggling. Lily is staying in the C tier. She's another brawler who's getting a hypercharge, and so she might be a lot better than she was, but for now she is a below average assassin. Gale is staying in the C tier. Very similar to Shelly, there's not a huge need for Gale right now since tanks aren't being used as much, so he's in the C tier. Griff is moving from the A tier down into the C tier. You know, and like I disagree with the pros, but at the same time I am really feeling it. Griff has been affected by the meta has changed in a big way, but he is also getting a hypercharge, which I think is one of the better ones this update. I can almost guarantee he's going to rank a lot higher than like middle or low C tier, but I don't know if it's going to bring him back all the way back up to the A tier. We'll have to see. I still like Griff, which is funny because when he released, I really didn't like him. There's just something about his playstyle I just really like. Nani is staying in the C tier. Nani deals plenty of damage, but her shots are just really, really hard to land, especially against a lot of the top brawlers that have high mobility. El Primo was moving from the B tier down into the C tier. He didn't receive any balance changes, but there are much better options for close range brawlers right now. Draco, hey, is moving down to the C tier. Hey! Draco plays particularly well with certain support brawlers, and even those brawlers aren't quite as good as before, so Draco is being used even less. Surge is moving from the A tier down into the C tier. I have no issues with this. I hate playing against Surge. Surge was another really good brawler to play against close range brawlers, but because close range brawlers are being used less, he is really struggling to keep up with them. So I mean, I'm fine with less Surge. For real. Rust is moving from the B tier down into the C tier. Rust is very dependent on which other brawlers are actually being good. And a lot of the brawlers that he typically is paired well with aren't being played at the moment. And additionally, the map pool right now doesn't really favor his bounce shots. So there's not a lot of good reasons to use him right now. Brock is moved from the B tier down to the C tier. Brock's biggest weakness is how easy his shots are to dodge against high mobility brawlers. And this meta is particularly bad for him. Eve is moving from the B tier down to the C tier. Eve is only really good against certain brawlers, and there are lots of decent brawlers that can pierce through her hatchlings, so she's just not as good as other long-range brawlers are. Miko is staying in the C tier. Miko received a small buff to his reload speed, but it hasn't really changed the way that he's being played at all, so he's in the C tier still. Grom is staying in the C tier. Grom is the second thrower on our list whose attacks are relatively easy to dodge, so he's struggling in this meta even despite recently gaining a hypercharge. Sprout is moving from the A tier down into the C tier. Sprout's attacks actually can be hard to avoid, but it really depends on the map, and the current map pool just isn't very good for bounce shots, so Sprout struggles. Ems is staying in the C tier. I lost the F tier just a sec. Ems is actually slightly better than before, but still doesn't play well against brawlers that can easily get close to her, so she's struggling. And now we have the B tier brawlers. These brawlers are actually competitive. They're typically only good in the right maps or modes, with the right teammates, or to counter specific brawlers, or they're just like generally good enough to play. They're not as good as the A tier or S tier brawlers at the moment though. Starting us off, we have Penny moving from the A tier down to the B tier. Penny is a pretty map dependent brawler, and there aren't many maps and matchups where she can easily protect her cannon, so she's not a top brawler for the moment. Nita is moving from the A tier down to the B tier. Nita was a really good choice against a lot of good tanks last update, but now they're being used a lot less, and Nita is as well. Otis is staying in the B tier. He actually was never really a great brawler except for when he was first released, but because of his range, his damage, and his super, he's never a bad brawler. Sandy is staying in the B tier. Sandy's super is strong enough to make him at least an average brawler, but his damage output isn't quite enough to keep up with the current meta. Leon is staying in the B tier. Leon's actually really good, but only if he is against brawlers that don't have attacks that can easily reveal his location, or brawlers that have enough health that they cannot be assassinated quickly. Colette is moving from the A tier down to the B tier. She's just another great tank counter that has gone down an entire tier simply because of those tanks not being played as much. RT is staying in the B tier. Very similar to Otis, RT has the stats to always be a decently safe choice on almost any map, but doesn't really dominate any aspect or individual aspect of the game. Maisie is moving from the A tier down to the B tier. She's actually still a decent brawler, but she's also a great counter to close range brawlers, which aren't as powerful right now. 8-Bit's moving from the A tier down to the B tier. 8-Bit is only good on certain maps and only with certain brawlers on his team. And while he was really good last update, he's being used a lot less right now. Byron is staying in the B tier. Many of the brawlers that Byron was being used to support have fallen down in the meta, and so Byron consequently has also fallen down a little bit. Pearl is staying in the B tier. No changes were made to Pearl this update. She's exactly where she was in the last update. Spike is staying in the B tier. Spike also didn't receive any balance changes this update, and he's honestly being used slightly less than before, despite being one of the free brawlers to play every, anyway, the free brawler really doesn't impact the competitive meta like at all, so it doesn't really matter. Charlie is moving from the D tier up into the B tier. Charlie actually had a pretty big buff in the update before this one, and while she's not broken like she used to be, she's actually being played quite a bit now. Buzz is staying in the B tier. Despite many of the close range brawlers struggling in this meta, Buzz is actually still a pretty solid assassin. Cordelius is staying in the B tier. Cordelius actually didn't receive any balance changes, but this current map pool is just favors him a little bit better. So, I mean, still B tier, but a little bit better. Tick is staying in the B tier. Even though Tick is the most fragile brawler in the game, he's usually a decent thrower just because of how well he can deal damage with close range brawlers as a thrower, and also how consistently he can deal damage from a distance. Willow's moving from the C tier up into the B tier. Willow received a buff to her health, and she's receiving her hypercharge soon, so she's probably going to be even stronger than she is right now. Larry and Laurie are moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Very similar to Tick, Larry is a solid thrower because he's actually pretty good against close range brawlers, but Juju kind of just does everything that he can except better, so Larry and Laurie is not being played as much. Jackie's moving from the C tier up into the B tier. Somehow Jackie's actually being played more in this meta, and a lot of it has to do with how many of the maps she's really good on are in the current map pool for rank. Crow is staying in the B tier. Crow received a buff to the anti-healing effect from his attacks, and while he is definitely stronger than before, he's still not quite an A tier brawler. Tara is staying in the B tier. Nothing changed for Tara. She's basically just as good as she was in the last update. Poco is moving from the S tier down into the B tier. Poco is just insane right after the gadget rework happened, so now that the cooldowns are longer, he's not nearly as good. Mandy is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Mandy received a slight nerf to her hypercharge rate, but actually brought her down an entire tier now that she's not charging it as much, which I have no issues with because I really don't like playing against Mandy. Piper is staying in the B tier. Piper's she's probably always going to be a really solid sharpshooter, but in this meta, sharpshooters are struggling to hit shots at max distance, so Piper's not as good as she usually is. Belle is staying in the B tier. Basically, the same thing can be said about Belle, except that she deals more damage at close range than Piper does. So she's actually slightly more usable than Piper, but not by much. Shade is moving from the C tier up into the B tier. Shade is pretty much useless on maps that don't have a ton of walls, but there seem to be a lot of maps with a lot of walls right now, so he's actually being played a lot. Mortis is staying in the B tier. Mortis didn't receive any balance changes, but he is being played just slightly more than before. Daryl's moving from the A tier down to the B tier. Daryl is a great assassin in a lot of situations, but like most tanks, he's getting countered more often in this update, so not quite as good as before, but still playable. Mo is moving from the D tier up into the B tier. Mo actually got a buff to his reload speed in the update before this one, and then his super got reworked, so he's actually playable now. Kind of funny how just being able to adjust the distance of your super actually makes a big difference for a brawler like Mo. Gus is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Gus has had a few nerfs in the last few updates, but he's one of the brawlers getting his hypercharge, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he quickly moved back up into the A tier, so just keep that in mind. Rico is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Another brawler that I am so glad to be seeing less of. Rico is very map dependent and he dominates on the maps that he's good on, but there just aren't as many of those in the map pool right now, which is great because that means I don't have to ban Rico as frequently. Okay. Now we get to talk about the A tier brawlers. These ones are a lot more useful in a lot more situations than the B tier brawlers. They're just not quite as good as the S tier brawlers, which are good like everywhere. Kit is staying in the A tier. Kit is pretty good on his own for a support brawler, and if his opponents don't specifically counter him, he can create some very easy wins for his team. Frank is staying in the A tier. Frank is slightly worse than before, but he's actually managed to remain in the A tier because he has so much health that your opponents have to draft around picking a brawler that can actually deal with Frank. So he forces some interesting situations. Barry's moving from the S tier down into the A tier. Barry actually received a nerf to his healing a while ago, and now that the brawlers that he supports aren't as good, he's not being played as much, but he's still a great A tier brawler. B is staying in the A tier. She received a nerf to her Rattled Hive gadget, and while she's not an A tier brawler, she's not quite as strong as before. Barley is staying in the A tier. Barley's just one of the best brawlers in the game that you can use if nobody on the map can break walls. So that's why he's there. Meg is moving from the D tier all the way up into the A tier. I'm not excited to see Meg being played more. She received her hypercharge after I made the last tier list, and it has made a huge difference for her. Plus, she got a movement speed buff to her while she's outside of her mecha, making her even easier to dodge shots. Ash is staying in the A tier. No changes were made to Ash this update, and he's just a little worse than before because of the current meta. Max is staying in the A tier. Max is another brawler that is usually good at supporting close range brawlers, so she's being played slightly less, but she's still good. Pam is moving from the F tier all the way up into the A tier. She actually received a damage buff that also charges her super faster, and now she is way better than before. She still also has not received her hypercharge yet, which will make her even better. Lola is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. She received her hypercharge in the previous update, and her stats are just so good that you really can't go wrong with her. Janet is moving from the S tier down to the A tier. Janet received a nerf to her hypercharge rate in the previous update, and now she can't cycle through her supers like she could before, but she's still a really great option. Amber is staying in the A tier. She is actually going to receive her hypercharge this update, and she's still a solid A tier brawler without it. So she really just might be broken soon. Consider her for an S tier placement. Ollie's moving from the S tier down to the A tier. Ollie's had a few nerfs over the last few balance changes, and his lower survivability finally knocked him out of the S tier. But he's still in the A tier. He's still a great choice. Finks is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Finks got a few major buffs in the previous update, and he went from being a below average brawler to a really good brawler on most maps. Squeak is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Squeak's actually been really good ever since the gadget rework, and even though he didn't get any buffs this update, the meta has shifted to be good for him in his favor, along with some of the maps where there's a lot of choke points that Squeak can really take advantage of. Gene is staying in the A tier. Gene didn't receive any balance changes this update, and he's still just being used on the same maps for the same reasons. Mr. P is moving from the S tier down into the A tier. Mr. P got nerfed quite a bit in the previous update since his hypercharge honestly just broke the game, but it's actually still pretty strong. Gray is staying in the A tier. Gray is one of the safest choices on almost any map because of how many brawlers he counters and how well he supports his teammates. Honestly, I don't want to see much more people playing Gray because he's actually really annoying to play around. Bonnie is moving from the F tier all the way up into the A tier. Bonnie received a rework to her super so that she can climb back into her cannon as soon as she wants, and even though she still doesn't have a hypercharge, this rework instantly made her a very good brawler, which is crazy. Lou is staying in the A tier. No changes were made to Lou this update, and he's right where he was on the last tier list. Juju is staying in the A tier. She's still the best thrower in the game, but even she is somewhat map dependent and will actually lose to other throwers depending on the map. Buster's moving from the B tier up into the A tier. He received his hypercharge in the previous update, and he actually got nerfed this update. But I guess his hypercharge made him so strong that he's still an A tier brawler. Bo is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Bo is another brawler that received his hypercharge in the previous update, and it made a huge difference for him. Melody is staying in the A tier. She actually didn't receive any balance changes this update, and she's still one of the best aggressive brawlers in the game. Stu is moving from the S tier down into the A tier. Stu was broken in the previous update mainly because of his speed zone gadget, and since it's been nerfed, he's not quite as good. Jae Young is starting in the A tier. Since the update's balance changes were a little delayed, we've actually been able to test out Jae Young quite a bit so far, and the pros agree that he is at least A tier. Meeple is staying in the A tier. Meeple received a very slight buff to his reload speed in the previous update, and I guess that's all it took to make him one of the best brawlers in the game. Angelo is staying in the A tier. Angelo remains the best sharpshooter in the game and probably could be considered S tier on certain maps where hovering over water makes a big difference, but overall, he's not quite good enough for S tier. So let's talk about the S tier brawlers. The best of the best, the band of the band. Carl is moving from the B tier all the way up into the S tier. He received his hypercharge in the previous update, and that combined with the recent gadget rework has quickly made him one of the most solid choices in the game on any map. Kaze is starting out her debut in the S tier. Now, Kaze is the only brawler on this tier list that has not been released at the time that I recorded this video, but she already has 2 different current hypercharges, and I just don't have any reason to believe that she will not be S tier. So I lied when I said that I didn't help with this tier list. I'm helping with Kaze, and that's it. But I think he's gonna be busted. Chester is moving from the C tier up into the S tier. Chester received his hypercharge in the previous update, and it's so strong that it was the only thing that brought Chester from the C tier to being one of the best brawlers in the game. Hank is staying in the S tier. I know that people are not gonna believe me and you're gonna think I'm crazy, but the pros agree that Hank is one of the best brawlers in the game. He has only been nerfed since his hypercharge has released, and he's still the best tank in the game by far, especially with the current map pool where there's a lot of walls for him to really play around. Lumi is moving from the A tier up into the S tier. Lumi actually was not released at the time that I made the previous tier list, and since she's only been nerfed and she's still almost the best brawler in the game, you can see how strong she actually is. But she's not the best. That is deserved for our final brawler. Kenji is moving up from the A tier into the S tier as the best brawler in the game. Kenji is the only brawler who had his hypercharge this update when I reached out to the pros. And it is easily the strongest hypercharge in the game and has made Kenji completely broken. And that right there is the competitive tier list. I wish that I could give you something that is currently perfectly accurate with all the brawlers that actively have hypercharges right now, but it just takes too long for me to make this video because I take so much time and effort to reach out to the pro players, take their feedback, put it all together into the tier list, and then it also takes time to film, record, gather all the footage, send it to my editor. Like, it takes time to make these videos, so I'm really sorry, but massive thank you to these pro players for helping out. I still think that this is a very accurate tier list with a few changes that will happen as brawlers do receive their hypercharges. I want to know what you guys think, so let me know in the comment section below who your favorite brawler to play is right now and who you just hate playing against. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in the next video.